Good afternoon. I'm John Cedar. I'm a kidney physician at the Cleveland Clinic and the chair of the Kidney X Steering Committee. Welcome to the virtual 2021 Kidney X Summit. For audience members who are not familiar with Kidney X is a public-private partnership between the American Society of Nephrology and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Kidney X's mission is to accelerate innovation in the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of kidney diseases. We are here today to celebrate the burgeoning innovation from the lab to the clinic in kidney medicine that has been driven by people with kidney diseases in partnership with the clinical and scientific kidney communities. In the past, the unintended consequences of an altruistic act by Congress have thwarted change necessary to help the 37 million Americans and 850 million people worldwide with kidney diseases, kidney failure, and kidney transplants to live their best lives. Today, we are announcing the winners of the Artificial Kidney Prize Phase 1 and signaling to the public and private sectors that the kidney community is driving needed change for people with kidney diseases. The goal of the Artificial Kidney Prize is to accelerate the development of kidney failure therapies that provide transformational treatment options beyond current dialysis methods. The competition brought together innovators from around the world, including Canada, Israel, Japan, the Netherlands, Portugal, Singapore, South Korea, United Kingdom, and the United States, signaling the broad interest in this problem. Later in today's program, the 6 winners will share their solutions with you and will be accepting your questions. Kidney disease remains a glaring example of a health disparity. This has been and remains unacceptable. Given that, I would be remiss if I didn't comment on the events since the last 2020 Kidney X Summit. The COVID pandemic continues, disproportionately affecting Black and Brown people. Our capital was attacked by forces which have institutionalized and perpetualized the structural racism and social disparities that they are battling to keep. I believe their effort is doomed. Our community, along with many others, has loudly raised its voice to demand equity in health and other domains. Kidney X remains committed to health equity, and the innovations it fosters must and will be available to all that will benefit from them. I am pleased to serve on the Kidney X Steering Committee. It is an engaged, insightful, and bold group. Our partners at HHS, led by Dr. Rachel Levine, are effective, committed, and focused on transformation in kidney medicine. Together with each of you, we will accelerate the advances so deserved by the millions of people with kidney diseases. Today is a celebration of our progress in meeting that commitment, but it's also an opportunity to identify and commit again to the actions that will be necessary to continue our forward momentum. I remind everyone this summit occurs at a meaningful anniversary. 20 years ago, thousands of people lost their lives in the attack on the World Trade Center, and I wanted to pause to honor their memory. Now for the symposium, let me do some housekeeping. Please use the question panel in your attendee control panel to submit a question to any of the speakers. Throughout the webinar, we will direct these questions to the appropriate speaker. Handouts for today's webinar, including the agenda, are available in your control panel in the Handouts tab. This summit is being recorded and will be available on the Kidney X website, kidneyx.org, in the coming weeks. Now to the program. It's my pleasure to introduce my fellow Kidney X Steering Committee member, Assistant Secretary of Health, Dr. Rachel Levine. Nominated by President Biden, Dr. Levine has been confirmed as the 17th Assistant Secretary for Health for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where she fights every day to improve the health and well-being of all Americans. Dr. Levine is a pediatrician, and her academic and public health work has focused on the intersection between mental health and physical health, especially treating children, adolescents, and young adults. She's had a distinguished career as an academic, the Pennsylvania Physician General, and then as Pennsylvania's Secretary of Health, where she aggressively fought the opioid epidemic and signed an order for law enforcement to carry the anti-overdose med naloxone that saved many lives. Dr. Levine's HHS portfolio includes health equity issues, and she co-chairs the HHS Behavioral Health Coordinating Council and the Health Disparities Councils. Having led the public health effort in Pennsylvania in response to COVID-19, she remains deeply involved in the federal efforts to combat this virus that is responsible for excess kidney diseases in our communities. We are honored to have her on our program and her talented team as a partner with the ASN and KidneyX, and delighted that she could provide a message today. Dr. Levine recorded her remarks yesterday, and we'll show them to you now. Thank you, Dr. Levine, and thank you for your leadership at the Department of Health and Human Services and your continuing support of KidneyX initiatives. At this time, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Leslie Trigg. Leslie has served as Outset's Chief Executive Officer and is a member of the Board of Directors since November 2014. She led Outset to its successful $278 million IPO in 2020, exceeding its $175 million goal. While I could tell you more about her distinguished career, I thought it would be best perhaps to just share a comment she made when we were preparing for this summit. When we were discussing the content of her keynote address, Leslie wrote me, "What we at Outset consider the moral imperative, restoring autonomy, agency, and identity to patients who deserve nothing less." This comment says more to me than any recitation of her CV, and we in the kidney community and at KidneyX are grateful for this commitment to patient-centered innovation. Leslie, thank you for taking the time to speak at the summit today.
Thank you, John. It's first of all, if I had known that my emails to you were going to be read, I might have spent more time crafting them. So you scared me for a second when you were talking about an email that I sent you, but that is 100% true. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It is truly an honor and a privilege. And first and foremost, I'd like to congratulate the winners of KidneyX. That is energizing and exciting, and I can't wait to hear more about the specific technologies that won. Let's see, if you could go to the first slide, that would be great. The first one with the orange background. Thank you. So I got maybe a little bit of background. I got into medical devices in 1998, which when I say that out loud now, it seems like a shockingly long time ago, which also explains why I now have to use the softening filter on Zoom, which I'm now realizing actually right in this moment is probably not available on this platform. So we'll have to work with what we have. But back to the story. So my first week at my first medical device company, I went to this all-employee meeting, and the CEO at the time, she said that 90% of the company's revenues were generated by products that were less than 12 months old. Less than 12 months old, 90% of the revenue. I was blown away, and I've never forgotten that. And I've often reflected on it because for me, that first day on the job, that really set the bar for innovation. I thought everything was like that. Okay, this is the pace of innovation. Now, in hindsight, that was incredibly fast in a space with a customer base that welcomed new technology with open arms. If you can go to the next slide. As I learned over time, and I've worked in a variety of different areas of clinical medicine from the device perspective, in hindsight, that space, which was cardiology, was what I would describe now as sort of a lush, verdant valley of innovation. I also realized, again, working in other spaces, that there were some areas of medicine in the device space that looked pretty different. And so I'm appropriating the term food desert. The term food desert is, when I looked up the definition, it's defined as an area that has limited access to affordable, nutritious food. And so borrowing from that, it kind of occurred to me, like, we have some areas of medicine and the patients they serve that have had limited access to new life-sustaining, life-saving, less invasive technology. Some examples of tech deserts, as I was thinking about this, that comes to mind is kind of like primary care generally. Let's start with the stethoscope, sleep apnea, orthopedic rehab, dialysis. So I think, we've got some examples of tech deserts. We have some examples of tech oases, is the plural for oasis, I guess, tech oases. And then what becomes interesting is why? Why does innovation flourish in some of these spots and it does not really take root in others? So you can move on to the next one. The Jared Diamond book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, was published in 1997. It's 528 pages long. I remember my husband at the time, he's still my husband, but at the time, my husband, he sort of lorded it over me that he did read this whole book, and I never did. But I did get the takeaway. And the essential premise of the book for people who haven't read it, and it really stuck with me through the years, and I think it may help answer, theoretically at least, the question that I just posed about why. So Diamond argued in this book that the fundamental reason why some societies flourished, early societies flourished, and others did not, and some grew in power and wealth, and some struggled and still struggle today, is due to inherent, what he called geographical determinants, geographical advantages that some early societies enjoyed. And these geographical determinants gave people effectively a head start. And then these differences magnified over time, leading later to vast differences in technology or health or geopolitical stability. So it kind of struck me as I was thinking about this over the weekend, like maybe a similar theory is at work here and can be applied to this question of whether some areas of medicine are a tech oasis and others are a tech desert. Are there geographic determinants, if you will, that separate cardiology from renal, from audiology to ophthalmic? I think that there are. So if you can go to the next slide. So the bottom, and we'll start at the top in a second, but the bottom are what I would describe as kind of the flora and fauna of the geographical determinants, again, appropriating that term, that maybe some societies, cardiology, ortho, neuro, might enjoy more than others. But starting at the top, so you have to have unmet clinical needs. You have to, and I have never found a space of medicine where people were like, "Oh, we're good, everything's great." Of course, we have so many unmet clinical needs to go and attack and improve. So that's usually never a problem. But then you also need time, and this becomes the problem. And this is just my 2 cents. I think you need a lot of time, because rarely is true innovation achieved with the flip of a switch. Patent filed, success nailed commercially. It is a long road. Whether you're innovating in the service space, the AI space, the device space, the biotech space, it all takes time. So then what do you need to get the asset, the resource of time? Well, you have to be able to attract investors, get money, and you also have to be able to attract talent. I think particularly challenging in this climate. It's tough to get the right minds around the unmet need for a long enough period of time to solve for it. So that's no small feat. Getting those resources to our society, then what does that take? And so this is what I would offer you as my take on the geographical determinants. I think, in fact, I know actually from doing a lot of fundraising and failing at it way more than succeeding, that investors and talented people who have choices about what industry to apply their talent to look for. Do the clinicians in this space have an early adopter mindset, right? Is there kind of a track record of embracing the new? Is there evidence of provider uptake of new technology? Hey, if I'm going to put $100 million and wait around, hang around the hoop for 10 years as an investor, is there a customer that's actually going to buy this new thing, right? And that makes sense. And then they're going to look for, generally, are government policies friendly? Is there a climate within the policy arena, not just reimbursement, but the general policy environment that cultivates and encourages new technology adoption? So if you buy that there are geographical determinants, which I believe there are, and that there are differences in these 3 things between the spaces of medicine, I think we've really got to pay attention to these and be very honest about where we are, which is, I would say, never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. And I really mean that, but also where we're not and where the opportunities still lie. Because if you can move on to the next slide, we're playing on a big stage here. The competition for dollars and talent really is not, it's not in the bullseye. This is like the anti-bullseye chart. Don't pay attention to the bullseye. That's the least relevant area of competition. Because in my experience, really the fight is in the outer layers. Right? We want resources and we want people for our society. Well, first we got to convince people that our geographical determinants are better than they are in cardio, neuro, ortho, psychiatric. I mean, anywhere else that people are inventing. Okay, then if we do that, then we also have to convince people that they should put their dollars and time into med tech versus diagnostics versus biotech. And then we also have to convince people that they should put their dollars and their time into life sci versus health IT versus healthcare services. And then we also need to convince people that they should put their dollars and the time into healthcare compared to travel, CPG, technology, energy, GameStop, God forbid. But that's really where the outer concentric circles are, where the game is won and lost. If we can make the center of the circle much bigger, everybody's going to win. The fight is not yet over which renal company. So we want the dollars in our renal society. We want the best minds for the members of our society, our patients. So status check. Are we there yet? My favorite question as a kid. I think this video, and some of you may have seen this, but I think this video provides some insights into the answer if you want to move forward and just roll the tape.
About leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role.
Thanks. So we can go back to the slides now. So here's the good news. I would not describe the state of innovation within renal as the low nut. I think we're past the low nut stage of state of innovation in renal. It's, as I was saying a couple of minutes ago, it really never has been a better time. I've been involved with this space now since 2012, so I've had a chance to observe it now for almost 10 years. The investor awareness has never been higher in renal. That's changed a lot. Through things like ASN's Investor Day, a few of us out there that have raised money and had to educate investors, big players like CVS using a very big voice, megaphone, to talk about a new future and a new vision for renal. That's all helped a lot. New programs like the ETC and TIPNIs, believe me, these are very high profile with investors. Everybody is watching. So there's a lot of hopeful optimism. I think now everybody's kind of holding their breath to see how it translates in the real world. That's helped. And then most unfortunately, COVID has put renal on the front page for all the wrong reasons. and probably, but has probably had an impact on, again, on awareness and even patient thinking and mindset about things like home dialysis. Programs like KidneyX, of course, at the front end of innovation have really changed this environment. So to all the entrepreneurs out there, if you're listening, like, jump in. It has never been better. And the water's gotten a lot warmer. That said, here are the numbers. So I showed this slide in 2019 at ASN, and by our estimate, actually I got this, I think, from the Medical Device Manufacturers Association. The estimate's about 7,000 medical device startups. And at that time, by our count, which was highly scientific, not at all, we thought we were aware of about 20, less than 20, I think it was like 18 renal startups. Now, we did our similar highly scientific count, but we do try to keep pretty close tabs. And this isn't just devices, and this is even into supportive technologies like new sensors, biometric measurement, wearables, et cetera. We're counting about 44. And there's a lot of false precision in the 44, or 20 could have been wrong. But generally, directionally, there's probably more. And again, credit and kudos to KidneyX, I think, for igniting a greater passion and a pull toward inventing in the renal space. But let's go to the next slide. But we could be getting so much more. We could be pulling so much more for our people, for our society. This is from Silicon Valley Bank. They track this very, very closely. And I just had this data pulled over the weekend, so it's super fresh. So $16.8 billion into healthcare. This is private, not including public money. 16.8 billion in 2020. And look at 21, the first half, healthcare is doing well. There's money being poured into healthcare companies privately. 21, more than all the calendar year of 2020. That's great news. Well, where is it really being poured? So look at the green bar below. A lot of biopharma. Okay, so what is interesting about biopharma? Lots, and it's great. But I love to see more of that in some of the other categories that over time look to be a little bit more stagnant. If you can go to the next slide. Now, this is the real kind of sobering eye-opener slide. So then I asked Silicon Valley Bank to look at Series A. Where's renal? The colors are 2018, 19, 2020, in the first half of 21, imaging, non-invasive monitoring, neurology, surgical, cardiovascular, orthopedic. I mean, crap, we're not even on the slide. And then I thought, okay, well, that's Series A. Okay. So maybe more money is going to late stage. No. So that is on the right hand of the slide, $5 billion. Same categories are represented there. So we just counted renal-related companies that were privately funded in 2020 and year-to-date 21. And I said by non-strategic investors, that's financial investors, because those are the dollars we're really, we're competing against, is the financial investors, not strategics that are already in our space. That is 6. And we were one of them. So really it's 5. So this is glasses half full. There is tons of upside here. And I think, our goal is like, let's make the slide. Let's get on the slide as a start. But I think to do that, then let's return back to how, and you can move back to the next slide. How do I'll go back to like, okay, so how, go forward if you don't mind, a couple. One, I think you might be behind by, you can click through those. There might be a build that we didn't catch. How do we get there? I think let's go back to geographical determinants. How do we strengthen our determinants and create the right conditions for an innovation movement? One, some ideas, clearly not exhaustive. There are other amazing ideas, but these are some ones that we have thought about. One, modernize the conditions for coverage. Old regs, very well suited to the time when we basically had one care delivery model. But I do think, and I've seen very novel, bold thinking about changes in the service model and the care delivery model are constrained by regulations that no longer fit the possibilities of our time. 2, equalized physician payment. Nephrologists should not be economically penalized or incented for caring for patients in one setting over another. that would help. I think we have to get rid of the investor perception that there are powerful economic disadvantages or disincentives to the adoption of new technology. 3, we have an opportunity to kind of update, refresh, amplify nephrology fellowship training in ways that would help create a whole generation of early adopters, both of again, new service models, AI tools, data analytics, of course, new devices. And I think that belongs in nephrology fellowship programs. And I think that would be really exciting and a really cool way to maybe attract more of the best minds into nephrology. And lastly, I think the last biggie here is we got to protect and nurture these new programs. And that's a request and a call to action for CMS. The investor community is watching ETC and TIPNIs with hope and cautious optimism, but they're watching and they want to see this translate into real evidence that it does foster new technology adoption. So those are some ways and some ideas that I think we could strengthen the geographical determinants and better compete against some of our other societies, cardiology, other neuro, and other. If you could go to the next slide, I want to maybe close with one last video. If you could roll that video, please. Thank you. So this individual, you're probably like, what the hell was that? So this individual you saw on stage, he's a musician, he's a husband, he's a father. We asked him to perform recently at an Outset meeting. And watching him on stage, rapping, dancing, I mean, for like 2.5 hours with no break. You would never have known that this individual was also a dialysis patient, is a dialysis patient, and a home dialysis patient. And for him, the flexibility and the freedom to do dialysis at home restored his life as he knew it before kidney failure. And there's these words, again, keep coming back to me at the risk of being repetitious, but like that returned his identity back to him, being a musician. That returned agency. He's like scheduling concerts again now. He certainly returned a deep sense of self-worth that otherwise maybe would have been lost. So that's what I think we're here to do, this whole community, when you strip it all away, because these are not privileges. These are rights. They're rights that our society, our people, patients living with chronic and end-stage renal disease deserve every bit of. So just to close here, I want to return back to the first video, the dancing guy video. That voiceover ended with these words. That voiceover ended with, as more people jump in, it's no longer risky. For those who were on the fence before, there's no reason not to jump in now. And I couldn't agree more. We all have to jump in and start dancing, frankly, to create the right climate for innovation, which starts with patents and it starts with KidneyX, but you have to go the distance and go so much further to really bring the tool or the technology, the service model, all the way to the people who really need it and who can benefit it. And that's a long journey that requires help from a lot of different players along the way. Everybody is needed. Nephrologists, nurses, techs, providers, CMS, FDA, societies, the industry themselves. If we don't kind of jump in now and dance, our geographical determinants within renal will languish compared to all the other places for investors and bright people to put their money and their time to work. I think we have to let go of this fear of things changing. And I think we have to start really thinking and acting on offense, not defense. We have to move away from protecting the past and what's been comfortable and advantageous for some. New is bold, and therefore new is uncomfortable. It's part of the package, but new is the only thing that ultimately opens up paths for the future that benefit all. So I guess I'll leave you with, watch the video of the patient there dancing. Like, our patients are dancing literally and figuratively right now, and they're waiting for us to join. And if not us, then who? So thanks again for the opportunity, and share some thoughts, and congratulations again to the Kidney X winners.
Thank you, Leslie, for really a great talk. It was wonderful. Now we're going to have a panel discussion, which will include Leslie, but in addition, I'd like to introduce the other panelists. Tim Boyer is co-founder and CEO of VenoStent, which develops vascular surgery innovations using tissue engineering of smart polymers. VenoStent was a Kidney X redesign phase 2 winner, and recently announced $2.3 million in seed funding. Janice Nave is managing director of Amgen Ventures, where she directs investments in biopharmaceutical and digital technology companies. Janice helped establish the fund in 2004, which has grown sixfold since that time. She's on the board of the Caltech Accelerator Fund Committee and the Silicon Valley Bank Healthcare Advisory Committee, and was selected to San Francisco's Business Times Most Influential Women in the Bay Area for 2020. Finally, Ken Sutha is a pediatric nephrologist whose activities include patient care, advocacy, and research. He's on the faculty at Stanford. In addition, he served as a clinical mentor for a team of Stanford bioengineering students. For their senior design project, they developed an infection screening device for peritoneal dialysis, which they called OpticLine. And that team won a Kidney X redesigned dialysis phase 1 prize. Ken is a former dialysis patient, and he's a 2-time kidney transplant recipient, so he brings that unique perspective to this. Additionally, he's been recognized for his advocacy as the 2019 American Kidney Fund Hero of Hope, and for his research by the American Society of Nephrology Jared Grantham Research Scholar Award. So with that, I think we'll move on to our panel. Why don't I lead off with the first question here. Leslie, your job as CEO is to solve problems. And maybe you can share with folks about pitfalls you encountered on your way to your successful IPO, and perhaps some mistakes you made on the journey to that to help give people advice.
Sure. Well, the mistakes part is hard to truncate to a couple minutes. As I said, we definitely made more mistakes than not. I think probably the greatest challenge for us, and I think every startup I've been involved with sort of has like a defining problem. No startup is problem free. Ours, not going to lie, ours was from the beginning reliability. Really challenging to have 3,500 components in a 36-inch box. And so we entered that with a bit of going all the way back to 2011, like a lot of probably some naivete. But I also think naivete can be really powerful, because had we known how technologically difficult it was going to be to do what we were trying to do, which was like a whole water treatment room in a 15-inch box, we probably wouldn't have had the temerity to start. So that was our defining. We didn't need a new CPT code. We didn't need like a bigger market. I mean, those are some of the other fundamental problems that some startups face, but ours, without question, we just battled it. Like how we nailed simplicity and two-way wireless data transmission, and all of that was great. It really getting that level of like consistency, predictability, reliability, and because what we were trying to package in 36 inches was novel and had never been done before. So that was the biggest challenge. And then getting investors to continue to believe along the way during many periods of time where there were literally no reasons to believe. It was a faith-based investment.
Thanks. Maybe the other panelists would like to weigh in here. Janice, what advice do you have to people that are trying to get their products to market?
Well, I mean, certainly we're focusing a lot on the earlier stage types of innovation. I think really it's changing the investor mindset. I think Leslie did a great job, leading us to this discussion, because I remember when I first started looking at these opportunities early on, or when the first one, approached me, I'll be honest, it was like 8 years ago. And I was like, a graveyard as an investor. You kind of have this mindset, right? Oh my gosh, there's no successes there. You got to kind of break through that, because when you actually get your message in there and you get an investor thinking about it and buying into it, you're really pushing away all that past history of knowing, oh gosh, it's too hard, it won't work. And I think, the other thing is to just really broadcast these successes. Like Leslie said, we should be on the slide, right? And the stuff that's being done by these winners and all the applicants, but also Kidney X is kind of a light under the bushel. Broadcast the success that's going on, because that will give us the momentum and maybe get more people out there on the field dancing.
Great. Ken, you were fostering innovation from early on. For those of us that are in the academic world, what advice do you have to try and engage young stars like you did for the redesigned dialysis phase 1 prize? They were clearly the darlings of those winners that time.
Yeah, I think what Leslie mentioned in her talk, really engaging people early, getting people thinking early in training, both for nephrologists and for budding engineers, thinking about these problems early and how tech and nephrology can be married together. I think that really getting out there and making sure that people know that this is a problem, that there are so many people living with kidney disease that are on dialysis that have these quality of life issues that could be addressed with new novel technology and new ideas coming into the space is super important. I think having interdisciplinary teams that are available, where we can bring together people from the medical space, from nephrology, with engineers, with people with more of a well. In my training, I feel like even as an engineer, I had some exposure to this idea of going from academia into more of an industry and product development space. But I think that's severely lacking in a lot of our training. And as Leslie mentioned, I think that's a key place where we can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Maybe you can comment a little bit, Ken, on the best way to get input from people with kidney disease and help us have patient-centered innovation.
Yeah, I think the patient obviously always has to be at the center of all the things that we're doing. I remember back when I started my career in engineering, when I went to grad school, looking around at the landscape of different technologies and things that were available in biomedical engineering related to the kidney, and really there wasn't a lot. And as Leslie mentioned, things have really exploded in these last couple of years. And it really is a truly exciting time with all the innovations in stem cell technology, tissue engineering, advances in dialysis, et cetera, and all the artificial kidney solutions that we'll be hearing about. I think that the way to really engage patients in that is really is to go and ask them. And I think being able to go out and get their ideas about what gets them excited, what are their barriers, similar to what Leslie mentioned with that individual who was the rapper that was on dialysis, knowing about the differences in quality of life that these new technologies can bring to patients is going to be extremely motivating motivating for people that are supporting the advancements of these technologies.
Leslie, Janice, maybe both of you can comment on this. This is actually a question from the audience, but I think it's a good one. How much do you think successful exit, it's like Outset's IPO, helps drive additional funding into our space?
Yeah, I love your perspective, Janice, but I'll say, I'll comment, I guess, on a remark that you just made. I think one of our greatest challenges I told you about our greatest technical challenge, but probably our greatest company challenge was not technical. It was convincing investors along the way. And I've presented a slide at another meeting. I think that was the names of 74 firms that turned us down. So we've had one failure after another, and it really, I think it was because there were no success stories. Next Stage, definitely a success story there, and they went public and built a really nice home patient base. But I think most investors were like, well, okay, but that was a long time ago. So, and is there more than one? And so they were kind of looking for something. There's a recency to this, and so that was probably our greatest challenge, is that there is comfort just to us as human beings when we make decisions, if there's a little bit of pattern recognition. And what I found is there was no pattern recognition that I could leverage to when I didn't have other facts, I didn't have other reasons to believe, and I also didn't have any other success stories. So, John, I don't know if it'll help. I'll let Janice comment on that. She's the expert in investing. It is my hope. It is my fervent hope that a few of us, can be successful and attract the next generation.
Janice, you want to weigh in there?
Yeah. Having a success like Outset, it sure doesn't hurt, for sure. But, we don't want this to be thought of as like Outset's a unicorn. And I think that's a bit like, Leslie was saying, it's like, yeah, but, investors tend to like to see pattern recognition. I mean, they congregate to the areas that have more of the massive exits. That's why you're seeing so much in immuno-oncology companies. So we need to have more of those successes. But I'll tell you, it certainly helps. It shows that it can be done and that there's a path. But I tell you, what Leslie was mentioning, it's going to take a lot more of the pieces and parts coming together to really turn this into like a really vibrant ecosystem where we see a lot of these opportunities coming through the pipeline, a lot of different components, a lot of different people's kind of stacking hands on this, from the scientific academic discoverers to, strategic investors. Hope we get beyond strategic investors, but also the policymakers and the payers and the providers. We really all have to stack hands that we're gonna really address this in a way so that we are the next moonshot, and hopefully it won't just be Leslie out there.
That's great. Tim had trouble getting on. There's some technical issues, but before we start, I'd like to give you the opportunity. Your company's on its way. It just successfully raised seed capital. Can you maybe you can comment on challenges you faced and advice you may want to give people that are starting out trying to move products to market?
Yeah, definitely. In this space, I first gravitated towards it because there's just such a passion around it, from nephrologists to the surgeons to the patients, of course. And so, to me, it was actually a pivot from like a cardio space to here, and I can't imagine focusing in any other space now. I would say raising money is always a challenge, as Leslie discussed, and as we've been discussing, you really need to hit your milestones. You have to hit, you have some really compelling science, and then you really have to execute. You have to move it forward, and we've been very fortunate to hit the right milestones at the right time and get these grants, get the Kidney X award last year, be able to raise a seed round. But, we've come a long way from, humble beginnings in 2016, 2017 to where we are now, but we still also have a long way to go. Leslie speaks from more experience than I do, but I would say, talk to me in a year about the investing environment, because we're about to embark on a Series A raise that we need to fund a pivotal U.S. trial. We have a clinical study ongoing right now, and early results are looking good. But of course, we really need to hit it out of the park to be able to raise the money to bring this to FDA approval and to market in the United States and get this into patients. It's complex. It's a complex environment, but I'm very encouraged by recent developments with KidneyX, as well as with the FDA's and CMS with the breakthrough device designation, and the benefits, the potential benefits there. Once that rule gets finalized, hopefully, for companies, it's going to be huge to be able to tell a story to investors of, this is solving a huge, important problem for patients. It's going to save Medicare a lot of money. Or it's going to save, healthcare dollars. But on top of that, we also have a way to generate meaningful returns for investors. And so, I just hope that, with the help of KidneyX and these other advocacy groups, we can bring to fruition programs like the breakthrough to allow for this, reimbursement path and Medicare coverage is so critical, I think.
Thanks. I think we're going to have to move on now. So I thank all of you for participating in the panel. It was entertaining and informative, and actually inspiring a lot of questions from the audience here that hopefully they'll get an opportunity to ask you sometime. And Leslie, thank you again for really an inspiring talk and taking the time to speak with us today.
It's really my pleasure. Thank you again, and congratulations to all.
Thanks everybody. It's now my pleasure to introduce the winners of the Artificial Kidney Prize. Well, this is what everybody's been waiting for, but before we begin the presentations, I'd like to introduce Dr. Carmen Peralta, who will moderate the question and answer sessions after each presentation session. Let me tell you a little bit about Carmen. Dr. Peralta is Chief Medical Officer at Cricket Health and an adjunct professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. She is a nephrologist, an award-winning researcher, an internationally renowned expert in the field of early detection and management of chronic kidney disease and hypertension. Her background expands both academia and healthcare technology industry. She's been named an established investigator of the American Heart Association and was one of Fierce Healthcare's top 10 most influential minority healthcare executives in 2020. Carmen is a Health Innovators Fellow at the Aspen Institute. She is passionate about building patient-focused care models that deliver improved outcomes and help patients live their best lives with kidney disease. We're thrilled to have her participating. Now for the 6 winners. Dr. Cooper, why don't you start us off? Jonathan, why don't you go? I think they're having technical issues with Dr. Cooper. You may be muted.
Yeah, Dr. Himmelfarb, we can't hear you yet.
Yeah, you're. Ira, you want to go? They're still working on the technical issues.
Sure. I'm Ira Kurtz. I'm a medical and scientific advisor for U.S. Kidney Research Corporation, and I'm chief of nephrology at UCLA. And the title of our solution is Development of a Dialysate-Free, Waterless, Portable, and Implantable Artificial Kidney. And I'm in Los Angeles.
Thanks. Shivo, you want to? No, we can't hear you either.
All right. Hi, I'm Shivo Roy. I'm calling in from San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a professor at UC San Francisco, and I work on an implantable bioartificial kidney. All right. Hi, I'm Shivo Roy. I'm calling in from San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a professor at UC San Francisco, and I work on an implantable bioartificial kidney. All right. Hi, I'm Shivo Roy. I'm calling in from San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a professor at UC San Francisco, and I work with an implantable bioartificial kidney. I'm Shivo Roy. I'm calling in from San Francisco Bay Area. I'm
Dr. Tactor, you want to see if we can hear
Sure.
you?
Hello,
Okay,
my
great.
name is Matt Hector. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. My name is Matt Hector. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of Makana Therapeutics based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we're investigating xenotransplantation as a solution to the organ shortage for kidney patients.
Perfect. Foko, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Foko Wieringa from the Netherlands. I work at IMEC and I'm here for the MyTram consortium that will present a tiny chip that might help dialysis in general.
Great. Jonathan, you want to try?
I'll try. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Jonathan Himmelfarb. I'm a nephrologist at the University of Washington, professor of medicine, co-director of a Center for Dialysis Innovation, director of the Kidney Research Institute, and now a founder of Kuleana Technology, Inc., which we've recently spun out of the University of Washington Center for Dialysis Innovation.
Thanks. Dr. Cooper.
It's Dr. Cooper here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can see him, but I can hear you.
I'm David Cooper. I'm at the Massachusetts General Hospital.
Dr. Cooper here. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can see him, but yeah, I can hear you.
I'm David Cooper. I'm at the Massachusetts General Hospital.
Can you hear me? I can see him, but yeah, I can hear you.
I'm David Cooper. I'm at the Massachusetts General Hospital.
Can you hear me? I can see him, but okay, thank you for joining us. I apologize for the technical difficulties. It really is an exciting day today, not only for you all, but for all of us in the kidney community. Just a little housekeeping to the audience. Please remember that you can submit your questions via the question pane, and Dr. Peralta will take it from here. So let's begin the presentations.
Well, thank you so much to all the presenters for these wonderful presentations. It is indeed a very exciting day for kidney innovation and advancement. So now we have the opportunity to do Q&A. I would welcome all the participants in the summit to please submit your questions. Just to remind you, you can submit them through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. So I have a couple questions to start from the audience right now. So,
can you hear me? My video is not in there.
Well, we have you on, yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Okay, so we have one audience question. We will start with Dr. Himmelfarb. So Dr. Himmelfarb, thank you for the clear presentation. A question from the audience: could a system on a chip approach further miniaturize your photo oxidation module?
Well, first of all, thanks for the question. We are working diligently to minimize, as it is, the photo oxidation module so that we can move to ever smaller, what are called form factors for a dialysis device, so that we can move from, say, initially a portable suitcase-sized device to a wearable device. We're doing this in a variety of different ways, including microfluidics and computational fluid dynamic modeling, to understand mass transport characteristics to get urea to the catalyst as efficiently as possible. And we're also working pretty diligently to increase catalyst efficiency, the titanium dioxide, a catalyst that breaks down urea. And I should also mention, FOCO gave a very nice presentation about the protein-bound uremic toxins, that the photooxidation technology that we're using also decomposes indoxyl sulfate, paracresol sulfate, and a lot of the other uremic toxins. So yes, we are using microfluidics and computational fluid dynamic modeling to increase the efficiency of the device.
Thank you so much, Dr. Himmelfarb, for that. We have another audience question. This will be for Dr. Tector. The question is, I thought that vascular endothelium incompatibility was the major barrier to xenotransplantation. So how does your system overcome this?
So as I mentioned in the video, we believe that is solely the product of antibody binding to the vascular endothelium. The antibody binding not only initiates some mechanisms of direct damage to the endothelial lining, it also can activate the endothelial barrier, which can cause thrombogenic surface or clotting-prone surfaces to be exposed, causing some of the downstream events that have been seen in xenotransplantation before. However, we think with the antigen reduction approach that we're taking, or antigen elimination approach, that eliminates both of those challenges, and we firmly believe that our long-term survivals in the non-human primate study, where we don't do anything special to avoid that barrier, we think those successes show that it is the antibody that is the driver of that damage and the barrier that you talk about. So we think we've understood how to overcome that, and again, our experimental data, I think, suggests that looks promising, that we are on the right path.
Great, thank you. We have a question from the audience that is not quite about your approaches specifically, but a general question about diabetes insipidus being a disorder that, of course, can cause a lot of imbalance of fluids in the body and leads you to be very thirsty, even if you're drinking. And the audience is asking if any of you are aware of any research being done or progress on treating this condition. And I'll open it up if any of the three speakers have any comments on that.
Well, I don't have any specific comments on that. I do know that the molecular biology underlying the disease condition is being explored at a fundamental, at a basic science level. And certainly when there's a genetic cause, as opposed to, let's say, a toxic cause, there are efforts underway using CRISPR and other gene editing technologies to be able to, in the future, potentially resolve a number of different disorders, possibly including diabetes insipidus. But that's total speculation on my part. Honestly, I don't have any particular domain expertise in that disease state.
Thank you. So this is a question for all the speakers, which I think is really important, and I'd love to hear from the three of you. Your perspective is from the audience. How helpful or important do you think talking with CMS and the FDA as you plan your work and experiments? Like, how important do you think that is, and how much of it is going on? If you can kind of give us your perspective. Why don't we start with Dr. Tector?
I think it's critical. I believe the missions of these organizations are to help us introduce therapies safely, first of all, and make sure that then they have effectiveness, and then they're sustainable and cost affording. It's economically feasible. So, given the incredible experience these organizations have at each one of those phases, it's critical to talk to them and understand and learn from their insights and their, the knowledge that they've accumulated.
Thank you. So Dr. Warinha, I know that you are not necessarily based in the US, but I'm sure this is also on your mind. Would love to hear your perspective.
I can only say that I admire the way that FDA and CMS are reaching out, especially through the Kidney Health Initiative. They are doing a tremendous outreach. They really are just full throttle trying to stimulate innovation, and they really give all the handouts of information that you would wish. I just wish that we have had them as well in Europe. I have to say that. Huh? So really, big hands for the outreach that FDA and CMS and many other parties doing via the Kidney Health Initiative, and also stimulating kidney access. I know that they are doing. Really, chapeau, as the French say. Huh?
Thank you. And Dr. Himmelfarb?
Well, I'd first really congratulate Leslie Trigg for the phenomenal success of Outset Medical, really setting an example of how we can navigate the FDA and CMS, and her really dynamic presentation earlier today about how we have to do this as a community. So there's absolutely no question that both approval and reimbursement are critical to de-risk the kinds of technologies that all the innovators are trying to develop. These are non-trivial. I think Leslie summarized it very well, that this is a hard road to bring a therapy from the bench to patients in a safe and effective way. And it takes a lot of investment over time. And that investment definitely requires de-risking from regulatory bodies and payers. Otherwise, investors don't want to invest. So as Foucault said, I really also want to compliment the FDA for the work they've done in partnership with ASN in the Kidney Health Initiative, and CDRH in particular has really been supporting and catalyzing innovation, and also dialogue that's starting to happen, I would say, with CMS as a partner. And I think the Advancing American Kidney Health initiative is also supporting all of these federal agencies getting behind catalyzing innovation and supporting change for the future. So I'm optimistic about the future, but there are barriers. But I do think we have the voice now of FDA and CMS in ways that we didn't have in the past.
And maybe I can add, I also want to thank the U.S. Congressional Kidney Caucus, because those policymakers are really looking at the fate of kidney patients in your country, and they also deserve big kudos.
Yeah, thanks. Question for Dr. Himmelfarb, Dr. Warinha, and it's: are there any advances in portable or small peritoneal dialysis therapy, or are you just focused on hemodialysis?
Well, maybe I'll start. We are focused on hemodialysis. We made a conscious decision because if we can make hemodialysis work in a portable or wearable fashion, the increased efficiency of a synthetic dialyzer membrane compared to the peritoneal membrane can bring closer to approximate normal kidney function. Having said that, the AWAC group that's based largely in Singapore has really focused on now making continuous peritoneal dialysis wearable by also regenerating peritoneal dialysate in real time. And they have moved into clinical trials with this, and they've achieved breakthrough status with the FDA. So there is work in the peritoneal dialysis space as well. I would say at the moment for portable wearability, there's probably more work on the hemodialysis side than the peritoneal dialysis side, with the exception of AWAC.
And there's, of course, also this approach with monitoring the line, the dialysate line for the PD, to see whether there's early signs of infection that a naked eye of the human cannot see yet, but a camera can. And so there are very good initiatives. And I would encourage the question poser to also look upon the IDEAS conference website, because you can backwards see the presentations from there. And there are a lot of interesting stuff also for PD. Really, miniaturization also is working there.
Fantastic. So this would be a question for Dr. Tector, and it is, how many pig kidneys have functioned for longer than 1 year in primates? We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Thank you. So in our group, it's over 10. I believe it's actually 15 we've had function for over a year. And our most recent series of studies, we've actually done some comparison to the numbers or frequency with which we get survivors out that long to the allotransplant model in the primates. And we're right on par with that success rate. So again, we're optimistic that the approach is in a good place for moving forward.
Thank you. Question for Dr. Himmelfarb is photooxidation primarily removes urea. However, that may not necessarily be the only, of course, toxic waste product. How are other non-oxidizable products removed?
Right. So as mentioned, TiO2, titanium dioxide, and UV light, which is the basis for photooxidation, is rather specific for organic molecules in general, anything with an aromatic ring or a double bond. And almost every uremic toxin has an aromatic ring or a double bond. So we can decompose other uremic toxins as well. But we're also working, we understand as well, that to make a device that replaces kidney function, we also have to maintain acid base and fluid and electrolyte balance, and we're working on strategies for that. And then there are additional sorbent-based strategies that can remove some of the other uremic toxins, such as the protein-bound uremic toxins. And I'll mention that we are just in the process of starting a collaboration with IMEC and Dr. and FOCO's group as well. And that's really through Kidney X that these collaborations can develop. So I'm sure that we will want to try something like your Minitran device at some point in time. So there are a variety of strategies that can be implemented to do the best that we can to replicate normal kidney function.
Great. We have time for one last question coming from the audience, and building upon Dr. Levine's initial comments on how do we ensure that we can get all these technologies to the most vulnerable. How do we ensure that they actually reduce rather than enhance disparities and make sure that these new discoveries and technologies truly will be implemented in a way that can reduce disparities? So perhaps I can give you each about a minute to tell me your perspective on each. We can start with Dr. Texter.
So one of the aspects we're looking at, obviously, when you try to bring a new technology into a market where there are some therapies for patients already, such as allotransplantation or human-to-human organ donation, you obviously don't want to compete or try to take organs away from opportunities away from those patients that could benefit from the current gold standard therapy. So one of the aspects of our approach is to investigate the patient background and makeup, their disease status and various other clinical tests and things like that weigh into who may have a good chance at receiving an organ and who may be at a disadvantage for some reason for receiving an organ, to help us, better comb through that information and identify the patients who truly could benefit from a transplant in the beginning and but wouldn't have access to a human donor organ. So that's something that we're very keenly aware of and want to do very carefully, so that, as I said, we're not taking opportunities away from patients where there is a viable therapy. And then obviously, as the technology grows and improves, there's clearly a great deal of thinking and a number of people with ethical expertise and patients understanding and all that will need to play a role in how best to roll the technology out to a broader patient population as the opportunity presents itself.
Thanks, Dr. Waring-Khan.
I think we have to look at the old Chinese proverb: if you give a man a fish, he will be hungry tomorrow again. If you give a man a fishing rod, he will never be hungry again. So an implant, an implantable solution or a wearable solution or something that you really can use at home easily will make you much more independent than something that you have to return to the clinic every time. And especially an implantable that, for instance, would last for 5 years at least, would make you worry-free in the meantime. And that would be much more cost-effective and also enabling people to work again.
Yeah, and this is Jonathan. I'll add, I think this is a big issue and a very important issue. And Foucault mentioned the Ideas Conference we hold every year in Seattle for innovators in renal replacement therapy, which we held a few weeks ago. And we had a whole session devoted to just this topic with a woman, Dr. Cervantes, giving a plenary talk and her views on this, and a panel discussion with Deidre Cruz and others who are sort of leaders in making sure that we try to be inclusive and that we take into account diversity and equity. I think there's a real risk, if this isn't done carefully and well, that new devices will be very expensive and will end up initially being allocated to a few instead of the many who need them. And we know that many diverse communities really are at risk for kidney failure. So we want whatever devices or solutions or strategies that really work for people with kidney failure are out there that are developed. We have to be very thoughtful and proactive in making sure they're made available. And again, this goes to CMS and others in trying to ensure that this is the case, as well as insurers, that we get these devices to the people who can use them perhaps the most. So I think it's a really important topic, and I'm glad that that question was raised.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations to the three of you. Thank you for such an engaged audience. I wish we had more time. We have plenty more questions that came through. So clearly the audience is excited about what you're doing. Just want to, we have to move on, but I want to remind the people, everyone attending, that there will be a chance to meet some of you at the end of the summit. So thank you again, and we will move on to the next set. Well, thank you for these excellent presentations. Certainly very, very exciting progress in all the fields, and thank you for joining us today. So we are now open for Q&A. I will remind the audience, please submit questions through your participant panel. We're eager to hear from you. And so this is a forum here where I'll direct some of the questions to some of you and some to the whole panel. So the first one is going to be to all three of you. And one of the questions that came up even in the prior session is related to health equity. And the question is, what can be done to expedite the access to new technologies or devices and their potential benefits to pediatric populations while still ensuring safety? And this is sort of in the theme of including everyone in the innovation. So I'd love to hear, let's start with Dr. Roy.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think it's very important. The pediatric population clearly needs solutions as well. And we have to think of the pediatric population as not just small adults. And they have special needs. They're certainly vulnerable. So we have to be careful how we bring new technologies to them. Luckily, the FDA has programs to accelerate the pace of innovation for the pediatric population through the Pediatric Device Consortia. And working through the consortia and working with teams that understand that pediatric populations are a special group and require solutions designed for them is the very first step. Luckily for us, there's a growing awareness of this. There's growing enthusiasm for tackling this area. So I think in the coming years, we'll see more focused solutions, unlike before where pediatric populations were an afterthought.
Thank you. Dr. Kurtz?
Two things are needed. One, we need more science put into devices that are specific for pediatrics. Some of the devices that we heard about today might be applied to the little kids, but you've got newborns, you've got various ages that require potentially different technologies. So the problem is actually more complex, even though the numbers are smaller. And then the question is, who's going to pay for these devices? It's sort of similar to the question posed in the previous panel. I think we have to take a stance that the nephrologists took in the 1970s when they went to the US government and said, look, we have this new technology and it would be unethical for this country not to pay for dialysis for the population. I think the same thing is going to have to occur with the devices that we're trying to create and others where we get the federal government involved, because they're the source of how these things are going to be paid for. If it wasn't for Medicare, we wouldn't have a symposium today. The billions of dollars that are put in to the care of kidney patients far exceeds the amount of money that any of us needs to complete our projects. So I think we're going to have to get the buy-in from the US government to have equity both in the adult sphere and the pediatric sphere.
Thanks. Dr. Cooper?
Well, I think as far as xenotransplantation goes, we have all the technology now. We have the ability to genetically engineer the pigs. We have new drugs coming through, new pharmaceuticals that prevent rejection in the pig kidney. And so I think we're ready to go into the clinic. I think we're very well advanced. And I think the FDA will realize that there's a great need for replacement of human kidneys because there's not enough numbers of them. And so I think they're responsive to that. And I think from the cost point of view, I don't think it's going to cost any more than it will cost to do a human kidney transplant. And it will negate the need for dialysis for several years, which will be obviously reduce the costs enormously. So I think from the cost perspective, we're not going to have to put any extra money into the system.
Thank you. We have a question for Dr. Roy. So there's a question related to if you can please expand on the vascular access for the IBAC and how do we overcome the increase of coagulation present in advanced CKD if the blood flow, particularly when the blood flow rate is small?
Sure. So The IBAC is surgically implanted and attached to the blood vessels. And over the past few years, our team has spent quite a bit of effort to optimize the anticoagulation likelihood of our device. We've done that by a combination of blood flow geometry and by optimizing the surface coatings. And in our studies, we've been able to operate the device at blood flows ranging as high as 1.5 liters and as low as a few hundred milliliters per minute without the need for systemic anticoagulation therapies. But as the questioner asked, that's certainly an important issue, and we have to be careful to say that this is not a problem. But I think the strategies we can draw on from the cardiovascular community for people who've developed heart valves, stents, artificial heart devices, who have worked on that problem, and bring that knowledge and technology to work on the artificial kidney.
Great, thank you. There are a few questions about human trials, and the first is whether human trials are open to for any of the innovations that you're presenting. And if no, I'd love to hear from each of the presenters. What do you think are the major milestones that you'll have to show before you're able to start the human trials? So why don't we start with Dr. Cooper on this one?
Well, I think the FDA will expect us to demonstrate that we can carry out pig kidney transplantation in non-human primates safely without the transfer of serious infections and so on, which I'm sure we can do. And with a sufficient number and for a sufficient period of time that we can show that once we begin a clinical trial, there's a realistic possibility that the patient will do well for a period of time. We obviously don't know what period of time that will be, but certainly we'd aim for sort of more than a year or 2 or 3. I don't think we'll get consistent success for 10 years, but I think we'll get good success for a reasonable period of time that will make it worthwhile the patient undergoing the trial. So I think the guidelines are there. And we just have to provide the FDA with enough information from the laboratory to demonstrate that there is a realistic chance the patient's going to benefit. I mentioned in my talk that I think initially we should look on the kidney transplant as a bridge to while the patient's waiting for a human kidney. But we'll learn very quickly from that. And we will quickly be able to say, well, this patient's probably going to do fine for quite a long time. And so we don't need to put in a human kidney into these patients. But I think initially that would perhaps be the goal. So the patient is just on having the pig kidney to keep them going until they get a human kidney.
Great, Dr. Kurtz.
I think the FDA will have different requirements for our 2 different devices. The portable device will have clearly different expectations than the implantable device. Regarding the portable device, which we feel will be completed first, we've already done some pig studies where we've kept an animal without kidneys alive for a number of hours. We've created synthetic urine. Its blood chemistry was kept constant. The FDA will likely require a much longer time than that, weeks to months, where we can show that in an animal without kidneys, we're able to maintain the blood chemistry constant despite the animal eating changes in its blood chemistry from the food it eats. It's that the device is able to maintain the water output roughly equal to the pig's water intake, and that the animal in general does well medically. There are also toxicology issues and biocompatibility issues with the components of the device that we're going to have to satisfy the FDA with. And then there's software validation that one has to do in all these devices, which can actually take quite a long time, up to a year, to make sure that the software is working properly and safely. And we have a lot of complex home-built software that we put into the device that controls the pump, sensors, and the various different components, despite, in addition to what I showed in the video. So it's a highly complicated device, and before we ever go to humans, we're going to have to clearly show that a pig without kidneys is safe.
Great. Dr. Roy, what's your thought?
Sure. So there is clearly a path to clinical trials that will require preclinical work and successes. And again, I think there are two roadmaps we can draw on for the IBAC. One is the work that has gone into developing, cell therapies that are implanted primarily in the area of islet transplant. That work has been undergoing for over 30 years. And a lot of that knowledge of how cells can be encapsulated, transplanted, kept alive and functional inside an animal and even humans for that particular therapy, we can draw that knowledge and apply to our IBAC. The other body of knowledge we can draw from, which I've referred to earlier, is from the cardiovascular community who have been working on LVAD work since the mid-70s. So we can bring the two bodies of knowledge to bear on to the IBAC. And also, there's great programs at the FDA, like the Innovation Pathway that has now become the Breakthrough Device Program, the opportunities for pre-submission discussions that the FDA welcomes and have found through our experience, they provide valuable feedback and encourage multiple interactions. So working as a team, borrowing from other fields would be the fastest way to get the IBAC towards patients and clinical trials.
Thank you. Great perspective. A question from the audience for Dr. Kurtz. Could wafer-based manufacturing help you to further miniaturize the device?
Well, actually, one of the components of our device, the electrodeionization unit that do the various ion transporting for sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarbonate, calcium, magnesium, phosphate, all these different ions have to be transported properly. And again, roughly, the excretion of these things has to equal the patient's dietary intake. We're using a wafer-based technology already, and we actually have a patent on our modification of electrodeionization devices, which are used throughout the world actually to purify water. So we're incorporating that similar technology that we've patented into our device. So we are already using a wafer-based approach.
Great, thank you so much. This is a question for Dr. Cooper from the audience. The question relates to how can we ensure that some of these xenotransplant options are implemented as humanely as possible?
Well, that's a very good point. And remember that these pigs will be very, very important pigs. So they'll be housed and cared for under the ideal conditions. We kill more than 100 million pigs in this country each year for food. And there are an estimated 500 million pigs killed in China each year to make heparin, the anticoagulant drug, which is taken from pigs' livers and lungs. So we're very used to using pigs for our own purposes. Many patients have heart valve replacements using pig valves. So we've used pigs for this purpose for decades. The pigs, will, as I mentioned, will be housed under very ideal conditions because we don't want them to become infected. We don't want them to develop any problems. And so they will be living much better lives than the average pig. And finally, when they are going to be euthanized for removal of their kidneys or their kidneys and their heart and so on, that will be done under anesthesia. They'll be sedated. They'll be done fully anesthetized, and they won't wake up. Much more humane than the way we slaughter pigs for food. So I think the pigs will be much better off if they're going to be donors of organs than they will be if they're donors of meat.
Thank you so much. So this is a question directed to all three of you, but in general, probably more for the device folks, actually. What is your goal around access? Do you think we will, the question is catheters and how do we overcome the fistula first philosophy? So this is probably relevant to Dr. Roy and Dr. Kurtz.
Perhaps I can go first if I understood the question. We envision two types of access. There will be patients who have a CVC, and there will be patients that have a fistula. Again, the portable device requires blood access. We are working, the issue that Dr. Roy brought up, we are also working on from two aspects. One, from the catheter itself, and then the ultrafiltration membrane. Clotting can be potentially a big issue. And also what wasn't mentioned was just fouling down the line. Independent of clotting, these membranes bind blood proteins over time, and their ultrafiltration properties change. And so both of these things need to be solved, especially in an implantable device where you can't be operating on a patient every few months to swap components. On a portable device or external device, you can just swap the parts that aren't working. It's a bit easier. But we are working on a coating for catheters that will completely stop clotting that we're working on a patent for right now. And that same coating will be put on our ultrafiltration membrane to prevent clotting. The membrane that we're using now, we have a new technology. It's a nanocellulose ionic liquid membrane. It already has anti-fouling properties that far exceed polyether cell phone or cellulose acetate membranes, commercial ones, or polycell phone or polyacetonitride membranes. So we're very happy with that. But yes, this is something that has to be solved, especially with an implantable device.
And Dr. Roy?
Yes. So the IBAC is an implanted device that after surgical location does not require any additional external connections. So there's no through the skin connection for either blood. We don't use dialysis solutions, so there's no dialysis connection. And there's no need for electrical power because it's run by the body's own blood pressure. So to connect the device through surgery to the patient's blood vessels, we use short grafts like they use for any other blood contacting device or repairing blood vessels. So those types of grafts, a host of materials ranging from EPTFE to others that are up and coming, can be used. So once that's done, there's no through the skin connection and there's no need for access from outside.
Thank you very much. A question for Dr. Cooper regarding the newer drugs that are being developed to prevent rejection of the xenotransplant. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how these are different than the current anti-rejection drugs that we use for human transplantation?
Yes, the drugs we use commonly either knock out the cells in the body that cause the rejection or affect the rejection, or they suppress their function so that they no longer reject. The new drugs that are being developed, at least one of which is already in clinical use, and others are in clinical trials, they actually prevent those cells from being activated, so that they no longer recognize that there's a transplanted organ there, and so they don't respond. Now, they're being tested for many conditions, including conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, because they have a good effect there as well, and they will be probably equally useful in when you've had a transplant from a deceased human donor, as they will when you have a transplant from a pig. But we have certainly found for the last 20 years that they're much more effective in xenotransplantation than they are in human organ transplantation. So they act in quite a different way. Now, at the moment, they have to be given intravenously, but you only have to give them, say, once every week or 2 weeks at the present, and probably longer acting ones will be made, which you have to give them. Now, that's a disadvantage to the patient in some respects, but for the early clinical trial, I think it will be an advantage, because it will mean the patient will definitely get the drug, because it will be injected. And my experience of looking after patients for many years is that many patients become forgetful, or they forget the drug, or they take the wrong dose, or they take it too much, and so on. So, and when they're injected, somebody, a doctor or nurse, will be able to check the patient and ensure that they're doing well at the time. So for the early clinical trials, I think it will be a safeguard that they're going to be given the drug by a medical professional.
Great, thank you so much. So I know we have more questions from the audience, but we are out of time and we have to wrap it up. So I want to say congratulations again to the winners. Thank you so much for participating in the Q&A, and to the audience to remember that you'll be able to meet some of the winners at the end of the summit. So thank you very much to all of you. I'll pass it back to Dr. Cedar.
Thanks, Carmen. Thank you for a terrific job moderating, and to all the winners, congratulations. Your innovations are incredibly exciting and promising and bode well for the future. Today's presentations really have highlighted the remarkable changes in the kidney ecosystem that are really spanning from bench science to federal government policy. The prizes announced today highlight the technologies that will revolutionize care of people with kidney failure. KidneyX is committed to supporting these innovators as they move these solutions to the community that needs them. And an issue that's been raised multiple times today, KidneyX remains and always has been committed to health equity. KidneyX will soon announce the second phase of the Artificial Kidney Prize, which will incorporate the work done by our partners at the Kidney Health Initiative to develop patient-centered innovation criteria. Our mission is also to positively impact kidney disease prevention and move diagnosis from description to mechanism. We recognize the urgency for success, and we're considering opportunities to responsibly grow our reach at KidneyX. As I always say, it's time to cure kidney diseases, and the people with kidney diseases, their families and caregivers are waiting. Okay. Given this, I think it's fitting that we end today's summit with a panel. Kevin Longino, the CEO of the National Kidney Foundation, will moderate and participate in the panel. Kevin, himself a kidney patient, is a member of the KidneyX Steering Committee. He first became involved with the NKF as a volunteer advocate, and in 2012 joined the National Board of Directors. As CEO, Kevin leads a team that's headquartered in New York City and field offices around the country. NKF is supported by thousands of volunteers nationwide and serves millions of patients and healthcare providers seeking support and education about kidney diseases every year. I'll turn the program over to Kevin, who will introduce the other panelists.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you, John. I want to introduce two other panelists that are joining us, Vanessa Evans and David White. Vanessa's been on dialysis for over 22 years and lives in Boston with her husband and two sons. She's a passionate advocate for the last 14 years, and she does not let her diagnosis slow her down. She works full-time as a senior manager of advocacy and communities for FMC North America and is a member of the Kidney Health Initiative's Patient and Family Partnership Council. Vanessa has a master's degree from Emerson College and a BA in political science from University of Massachusetts Amherst. She's presented for many organizations, including the National Kidney Foundation, PCORI, ANNA, AAKP, FDA, and HHS, and is considered by many an expert in patient experience and engagement. Also joining us is David White. Dave is a healthcare consultant with expertise in patient-centered care, patient engagement, and kidney disease awareness and prevention. He's a kidney transplant recipient and a veteran of in-center dialysis, in-center nocturnal dialysis, and peritoneal dialysis. His mission is to promote population health through advocacy. He serves on the boards of American Association of Kidney Patients, the Kidney Health Initiative, and the Veterans Transplantation Association. He also chairs the Kidney Health Initiative Patient and Family Partnership Council and co-chairs the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute's Advisory Panel on Patient Engagement. We have some pretty good experts here. As John mentioned, I'm a kidney transplant recipient myself. I did peritoneal dialysis before I got a kidney from a deceased donor. We've really heard some exciting things, and before we get any further in, I wanted to send my congratulations as well to the finalists. We had a wonderful group of people that submitted finalists, but also to the winners, and thank you for that. So, a couple of questions for the group for Nessa and Dave. Based on your experience with kidney disease, what really excites you the most about what you've seen from these KidneyX winners so far?
Sure, I'll go first. So first of all, congratulations to all the winners. I have to say, as a patient sitting here listening to this, it was really very exciting. I think what's most exciting is that we're having these conversations, that we're talking about, the future, new innovations, portable, small, maybe implantable. So these things are really very exciting. And I just want to encourage all the engineers, the scientists, doctors, innovators, to keep going, because this is for people like this panel. And we're really encouraged by what we're hearing today.
Dave, what do you think?
Well, I also would like to congratulate all the winners of the Artificial Kidneys Prize in this round. And I echo Vanessa's comments. And what excites me the most is that I can tell that the winners are listening to us. It came out through the videos, which started out with the stories about people, which is what we are. I also took a look at the abstracts, both the technical and the patient abstracts, and the fact that they're listening to us really came through. Just a few examples were MyTrams had a really human-centered patient abstract, and it really explained in terms way I could understand how that chip takes care of the toxins that dialysis doesn't take care of. And most importantly, FLACO shared the goal of working with other device manufacturers to help us give people on dialysis more freedom now. And that now there's a big if that comes with that. And I heard the answer to that as well in these presentations, and that's the need for collaboration. We can't work in silos to solve the issue of getting people off of dialysis. We need collaboration from the developers, from government, from all sectors of industry. And we have to communicate honestly and consistently with the people that are going to use these devices. We're not just patients, we're consumers. One of the abstracts, I believe was the active, in the technical abstract, it said, if patients don't want it, it won't succeed. And people better know that up front.
Yeah, I agree. I want to echo everything you said. I was really impressed how throughout the presentations and submissions and discussion today, we talked about two very important things. We talked about patient being at the center of the development and not just thinking about solving technical problems, but getting the patient to the point where they can have a normal, sustainable, active life. And being very patient-centric in terms of the design, the delivery, the access. And also, I'm encouraged that we're talking about health equity from the beginning. We're visualizing how these solutions are going to be used and how they're going to be implemented, and not really thinking about just things like reimbursement, but things about usage and how do we democratize these technology to where everyone can have it and we can be extremely ubiquitous with their usage. So I'm encouraged by that and excited about that. Another thing I'm excited about is just the breadth of what we've talked about. I mean, we've gone from we're talking about silicon as a new technology platform for improvement. We're talking about membranes. We're talking about Xeno. We've got a really large breadth of opportunities. And I think for us to be successful in this space, we're going to have to really approach this in a lot of different ways and a lot of complementary ways. And I'm very excited to see this. So congratulations to everyone that's come at this. And congratulations for KidneyX for really recognizing there's a lot of ways that we can approach the problem of renal replacement. So a couple of other questions I'd like to put to Vanessa and Dave. How do you think patients are going to measure success? Oftentimes, as a transplant patient, as a kidney patient, it's been a little bit dismissed, my issues with side effects, or been dismissed with my downstream issues or the fatigue or things like that keep me from working. So from a patient perspective, the fact that I'm not dead is not necessarily success. Success is being able to be functional. So how do you think, based on your representation and conversation with patients, how are they going to define success of any one of these technologies or all of them?
So, Kevin, this is such a good question because I really think that success is going to be measured differently for different people. For instance, I'm a home dialysis patient now. I've been doing dialysis at home for probably 16 years, but in general, a patient for 22. So if I was to be measuring success as a dialysis patient, right, I'm going to be looking at my quality of life. I'm going to be looking at, supplies. What does it take in terms of training? What does it take in terms of how does the impact affect my family? How often do I have to go in and visit my care team? How am I feeling day to day? How much medication do I need to take? And what are the risk factors, right? So what are the pros and cons? Whereas I would think, Dave, and you can tell me, as a transplanted patient, you did dialysis, but you're also kind of measuring it on where you are at this point now, I would think.
Absolutely. And being a transplant recipient for a little over 6 years, it's interesting. Earlier this year, I actually crossed over to where I've spent more time as a transplant recipient than I did as a dialysis patient. And one thing that dialysis kept me alive for almost 6 years, and that was with 3 different modalities. I actually went from nocturnal in-center dialysis to peritoneal dialysis, back to regular in-center dialysis, to a transplant from a deceased donor, all in the span of 2 years. And I was able to do that because the technology was there and I had access to it, and I was able to choose the therapy that fit my lifestyle best at that time. Patient-reported outcomes are what are going to be the measure of success, how well those are achieved. Rehabilitation is the best way I put it. The roadmap, which a lot of, if not all, of the winners today utilize, speaks to what matters most to patients. For me, it's the ability to go back to work. I've been blessed with my transplant to be able to do that after a long time of not being able to do that. Vanessa, you spoke to some of those outcomes as well. The ability to spend time with your family, the ability to travel, the ability to live the way we used to live, and the way that we want to live again. That's how we're going to measure success.
That's great. I think those are good questions and good points of view. I think it really will depend, particularly if a lot of these products are successful hitting the market in a similar time frame. There's going to be some interesting choices and trade-offs around these different modalities that patients are going to have to go through, which I think is going to lend itself to the need for a lot more patient education on the front end. We've talked as a group. I know you, and we've talked before about how patients can really impact and benefit the development and product development innovation process. What do you think are good examples where, and if you were building the case for bringing patients in early to the development and design process, where patients could contribute and add benefit immediately to the design process? What are your thoughts on that?
So I just want to, so 2 things. Number one is patient education is so important. Unfortunately, many patients still, as we know, the inequities in education, a lot of patients don't even understand home dialysis still, and what their modality choices are. So I think we have a long way to go with that. When it comes to innovation, I think it's so important to include the patient perspective. I would encourage having a PAB, so a patient advisory board, from the very beginning. Why? Why would you want a patient advocate board? The reason I think you need a patient advocate board is because your product, your device is going to be serving a population. But it's not all the same type of people. We all have different backgrounds. We are different, ethnicities, different educational backgrounds. So you want to hear from all different kinds of people so that you can really represent that board. The advantages of having a board is understanding what's important to the patient. Is it training time? Is it usage? Is it access? Is it portability, right? What is important, and understanding what is important. I mean, you go and you design a device that nobody wants to wear or nobody wants to use, then you've kind of put all your eggs in one basket and you haven't really spoke to the consumer. So it's important when you're doing something like this that you speak with that consumer and you know what's important. And then the other piece that I would say is, not only should you include patients, but I also would say that you could include families of patients, like a care partner. Because when I'm a dialysis patient, it affects everybody in my family. And so understanding what their needs and wants is just as important as well. Dave?
You're a challenging act to follow, Vanessa, but I'll give it my best shot. And I'm in a great position to do that because my answer to the question would be the best test case for showing the success of how patient engagement can help drive innovation is KidneyX itself. I have had the real honor and pleasure of knowing about KidneyX before the rest of the world did. And that was because I was a member of the Kidney Health Initiative Patient and Family Partnership Council. We found out about KidneyX in 2017 at ASN Kidney Week. I'd say it was about 7:45 in the morning when the HHS Chief Technology Officer and Dr. Sandeep Patel, Innovation Wonk, I believe, on Twitter. They came and joined our in-person meeting to share with us, the vision that we are living right here, right now. This was back in 2017. And our little 10-member council, we heard that. And, we were embedded really before it kicked off. And that has remained to this day. We informed the patient engagement strategy early on. We've been judges in all of the competitions. We have a great representation right now. I know our colleague, Derek Forfang, was one of the judges for this round, and he's also a member of the steering committee. So we've had patient engagement. It's been early, it's been often, it's been constant, and it's been at every level.
That's great. So I think I've heard some good things. I think we've heard that success is really going to be dependent on different patients and kind of their background and their situation. But we're going to be comparing ourselves to current dialysis and is it better? Is it better or worse and longer than a deceased donor or human living donor kidney? So those are the kinds of things. But also, can we have a normal life and what does normal mean to us? I think the point you made about bringing in the family and the caretaker is important. When you're on dialysis, it's a household event, and I think that's something we can't forget. I think there's also, Vanessa made another point. There's a lot of things we know now about just trying to move people from in-center dialysis to home dialysis. We understanding what those barriers are, understanding what those limitations are, understanding what those educational and promotional requirements need to be. Those are good lessons for us to take as we move forward to some of these new technologies and new products. And so I encourage innovators to really think about what's being done in that space right now actively and see how we can transfer that to some of these new things. I also heard a long list in the conversation of where patients can help innovators make decisions about feature trade-offs and benefits, things like safety, things like longevity, things like mortality, things like product maintenance, things like the need for drugs and what kind of drugs and side effects on drugs. Trade-offs between what I'd rather have a mobile device versus a more effective nocturnal device or in fact an implantable device. So I'm encouraged, and I believe that patients can help innovators with these decisions around usage, around access, around training and educational materials, and how do we kind of get the marketplace, if you will, ready for these new technologies. So I'm encouraged by that. I'm going to look, we're running a little bit ahead. Is there anything else you guys want to add? And I'll quickly look and see if there's any questions we might have from the audience to talk to.
Yeah, Kevin, I would just reinforce kind of what you said about some of the trade-offs. When you're looking at new devices, I think it's really important to understand the patient perspective, because would I love to get off dialysis and be free? Yes, but maybe what is the risk of the xeno, transplant, and understanding kind of the risk benefit is important. And so that's where you have to meet the patient where they are right there. So when you ask that original questions on, what would it mean to you? That's why I think it's really different to each person's perspective, depending on their quality of life. And everybody's quality of life on dialysis may vary. And so those things are important to take into account. And again, why you should be looking at a PAB to get, an inclusion of different conversations and feedback.
I want to, the one thing that's really, really impressed me about today's meeting is everyone's focus on health equity. Even Dr. Cedar kicked us off by mentioning diversity and innovation. And I love that. I think we should keep that mantra and just hold on to it. African Americans, Black Americans are about 13% of the American population, but we're about 35% of the people on dialysis. So, we're overrepresented in that population, and we need to be brought on board early in every discussion at the community level. We need to make sure that we're all aware of the discussion that we're having. We have to have an honest discussion, and it's got to be consistent. And if that doesn't happen, we'll just be, as we've all, many of us today have addressed the fear that we'll just be perpetuating and possibly worsening disparities on every level.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a great point, Dave. And that's why I'm encouraged that, as you are, that we're talking about it early. I think, if I can make a pitch to the investors that are on the call, the potential investors on the call, if you care about social justice, if you care about health equity, if you care about social determinants of health, if you care about venture philanthropy, the kidney space is the intersection of addressing all those things. You can take on public health, and you can take on disparities of health. You can take about disadvantaged communities if we can come up with more ubiquitous, low-cost solutions for this space. And so I encourage you to think about it that way and think about it with that filter. We do have a couple of questions. Let me look at the form here. One question for you guys that came from the group is, shouldn't a target for all chronic diseases, including kidney disease, be complete normality? So for kidney, all modalities should aim for the same level of normality.
So here's what I think. As a kidney patient for most of my life, it's true for me to say that I have my own normal, right? My normal might be different than your normal. And so, yes, I would love normality. But really, I think any kind of advancement where you're not necessarily tied to a machine for a dialysis patient, or you're not taking these immunosuppressants that, can create other diseases and issues, that to me would be a huge advancement. I feel like I'm willing to take little bits at a time, because these are conversations that are long overdue.
I couldn't agree more on normality. As I said, rehabilitation is the goal. I'm coming around on 60 years old, so my normal has changed from what it used to be. I've been a person living with kidney disease for a long time, and I'm comfortable with compromise. I'm comfortable with accepting risks, and that's something that innovators should keep in mind. It doesn't have to be perfection. Let's not let perfection be the enemy of the good. I have to quote my mentor, Richard Knight. I'll never forget when he said that.
That's such a good point, Dave. I just think that, yes, we would love perfection, but we are so desperate for innovation and for things to move that we will take little steps at a time. Yep. So, here are words as a phrase of encouragement to, let's try to get there.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well said. Well said. Another question is, what do you think these innovations will do to the current dialysis market? Who are we putting out of business? Any care to comment on that?
So I'll comment. things change over time. And I do think that it's not about putting people out of business. I think it's finding new innovation. And that's what happens in business, right? They grow and they move, and that's what happens. There's growth and movement. Now we have a movement to home, and we see, which is a great thing for patients. And it's nice for patients to have the choice to be able to do that. So I think it's just about innovation and growth.
Yeah. Dave, any thoughts?
Our biggest enemy is inertia. We don't have to mention names. We all know what's going on, but the world is changing around us. We've seen that in the last 2 years. Kidney therapy has to be part of that change. Shep Glazer, way back when, saved countless lives when he spoke to the House Ways and Means Committee. And it's on us to honor his legacy. It's our turn to do the right thing for humanity.
Yeah. I had two thoughts when I immediately hit my brain when I read that question. The first one was, Kodak invented the digital camera, and what put them out of business was the digital camera, and yet they invented it. So, it was theirs to win, it was theirs to lose, and they lost. The second thing I think is most important to know is that 12 to 13 kidney patients die every day on the wait list, and about 20 have been told they're on the list so long that they're no longer healthy enough to survive the transplant, and they're taken off. And I think that's the bigger thing I'm more concerned about, is that death rate, that mortality rate on dialysis, and that mortality rate on the wait list. And I think those are the things that are primary from a patient perspective and a patient advocacy organization. Those are things that we think about every day. Let's see. The last one, the patient, this may be more of a comment than a question. Let me read it. The patient voice has really increased over the last few years, so a huge thank you to all of you. Thank you. Thanks for saying that.
Mm-hmm.
How can we leverage it even more so that, similar to oncology, we have planes painted in whatever kidney color we choose, just as we have planes painted pink for breast cancer?
That's a good question. I think it's what we're doing right now. I think we're in the moment right now, which is, to have these conferences. They're difficult. People take their time virtually. We can't meet in person right now. We're being safe. And I think it's to take the time to be able to do these things and have the conversations and continue to educate not only the patients, but also staff and people, in industry, so that we can move to the next hurdle.
Yeah.
And again, there are maybe 600,000 people in the United States with end-stage renal disease, and there are millions and millions of people who don't know that they have kidney disease. Earlier detection, earlier screening, and make this a more public discussion. HHS has really stepped up to help make that happen, but a whole lot more needs to be done. We need to start paying for health, paying for wellness, and we a few dollars up front will save millions on the back end.
Yeah, I agree. The Susan Komen, the example that was given around pink, that initiative started as a grassroots effort. It started as having conversations and getting the issue on the forefront. So we as patients, we as part of this community, need to continue to make sure that the American public understands the public health crisis that is kidney disease, and really get it introduced in our media, in our conversations, in our healthcare systems. And really try to continue to advances. I think getting kidney disease to be an open conversation, and the public health crisis that it is, and what it's costing the American taxpayer, and what it's costing us in lives every day, making that more prevalent conversation is what we need to have happen. And then the organizations that want to get behind that effort and identify that they're behind that effort by putting a pink or some other color logo, that's when they want to associate with something like that. So that's the kind of things we need to do. So it starts with us, is the answer, my short answer to that very complicated question. But thank you for that question. So it's 3:28. I think we're going to sign off. I'm going to say thank you to Vanessa and thank you to Dave. They put a tremendous amount of work being proactive patient advocates, and they're fantastic. And I'm glad you got to meet them and hear what they had to say. Thank you for Kidney X, and thank you for the winners for letting us have the end of this conference and be able to put the punctuation on some of the great things we've already heard today. And thank you to the winners. So I'll hand it back to you, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for your patience, your partnership, and all the time you've put in to helping move the kidney community forward. You and all the other patients that have been involved in this, we couldn't do it without you. You're leading the way for us. With that, I will end this part of the summit. I think that they will be posting a link soon where you can meet some of the winners. Each one of the winners is going to be in a separate room, and there'll be a staffer there to help moderate the discussions. I also think the links have been sent to you. So thank everybody for participating, and I look forward to onward momentum and next year's summit with even greater success. Thanks again.
Thank you.